What is buffer time? What is buffer time? Is what buffer time?
Hey again, buffer timers. It's Sunday. Today, we're going to talk about a questionable episode of Enterprise, Dear Doctor. Before we get into it, let's introduce ourselves. I'm Dustin from Best of Trek, Worst of Trek.
The note has been taken. Yay! Hi, I'm Dr. Delirium. I have no YouTube channel because I'm a loser and I have opinions that no one cares about.
I don't believe you. And I'm Scott from, opinions no one cares about.
So this one is all over the place in rankings that I have seen on the internet. IMDb somehow has it as an 8 out of 10, which is very generous. IMDb is notoriously fickle. And I've seen it like TrekRanks.com has it as like the 10th, I think, episode, best episode of Enterprise. I've seen it as like it's the worst thing ever in Trek in some people's eyes. So this ought to make an interesting discussion. Well, let's start off with kind of an easy one. What is the A plot in this filler-heavy and multiple plot episode?
I believe that the A plot has nothing to do directly with the actions of the episode. I think the A plot is about humans learning how to interact with other alien species. That's my answer.
Fair. And at the same time, Phlox is like the main character of this one, so it's also about aliens learning to live with humans.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, it should be. It's the classic, like, Star Trek A-plot, but it gets about the same amount of screen time as, like, the whole thing with Cutler and the other just little things going on in Phlox's life, like, between him and Hoshi and his letter to not Richard Reel.
But see, I think at least the Culver plotline, Cutler, I get her name wrong. Cutler.
Yeah.
I think the Cutler plotline goes further into this, like, looking at relationships from the Denoblian point of view and the human point of view. And the idea that, like, Phlox doesn't just come out with, by the way, you should probably know that Denoblians have 3 wives and they all have 3 husbands. And by the way, I'm all full up. Like, he doesn't even offer that because he doesn't know to. And so I think a lot of the miscommunication between Cutler and Phlox further, like, sort of humanizes this alien comparison plotline.
That's fair. I think it speaks to how well balanced the plot lines are if you can't really pick out which one the main one is. Like, as you guys know, I'm making my way slowly through season 1 of TNG, and there's been a couple of episodes where, like, even I've noticed it, and it takes me a while to notice stuff like this, so it proves how obvious it is, where the side plot, or subplot anyway, just takes a screeching halt so you can focus almost entirely on the main plot. What were the ones I noticed? I think it was Lonely Among Us and Plague. I can't remember the second one because I'm focused on the subplot and honestly can't remember the main plot. Something about a plague going around. Angel 1? Might have been Angel 1.
That's not Plague
No,
One.
that's not right. No. There's something where there's a whole thing going on, but at the same time, there's a plague ravaging the ship to the point where Geordi is in command, which I thought was
that
amazing
was
because
the one I was
he's in
thinking
junior
of.
grade.
Yeah, that was the one I was thinking of. I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, the one where Geordi ends up in command because
I think
everybody else
Norman
is
brings
sick.
up a good one too about Data's Day having several different minor plot lines, but that it's really about the summation of the episode.
Yes.
Right. The TNG episode it reminds me of, I can't remember the name of it, the one that tells us that warp travel is harmful to space. And it's like it's like eco-activism really, but there's like 4 or 5 just tiny plots going on. And I don't know that they all gel, and I feel the same way about this episode. Like, they're all okay and serviceable in their own rights, but they almost detract from, like, the message that is trying to be hit in the A-plot.
Right.
So as far as things that are irrelevant to the plot, does the intro have any significance to the rest of the episode, or is Phlox just feeding his menagerie as filler?
Seems a little fillery, but I'm sure somebody figured out more to it than I did.
It's going to make me sound like a broken record, but I think it firmly establishes that this is not a human doctor. That this is not a human doctor going around his rounds in the morning. Like, we're starting from the very beginning with, this is a doctor that you, the human viewer of this show, will not relate with right away.
Yeah.
And so it's the idea that he continues by writing a letter to a human doctor to explain Phlox's own experiences with dealing with humans. I think that's the setup for this whole, like, how do humans interact with alien cultures responsibly and respectfully? So that's why I think it's there. But like I said, I think I watched a different episode than most people.
I swear every review I see on this, it's like everybody that's watching it sees a different episode.
Yeah.
So, how do each of the species' interactions that exist in the episode illustrate the beginning of humans' understanding of alien diplomacy? And this is really the first big one in the Enterprise, in the show, and really the first thing in canon that we see of, really having to make some moral choices about how you approach an alien race.
And I think it makes sense for Enterprise to play with that, not just time-wise, being, the prequel, but also because Archer, throughout the entire series, is dancing this line between that statement he makes, my compassion leads my judgment, guides my judgment, something in those lines. That's a very human trait. I couldn't see a Vulcan doctor saying the same, or a Vulcan captain even saying the same thing. And so again, I think it's like looking at this naive view that every alien race they're going to meet is going to have the same morals, values, ethics, laws, understandings, and the idea of civil rights the same way that Earth does. And that's just not the case. And they go in and they kind of start mucking with things, and then they realize the whole Menk issue,
Yes,
which they didn't address from the get-go because the Vlaki had no reason to talk about the Menk and probably no consideration. It reminded me, at least this part kind of brings in Tuskegee a little bit in my mind. The idea, and I'm going to go there, but the idea of asking people, harming people in some cases, to develop scientific research isn't completely foreign to us, but we no longer see it as ethical. But does that give us the right to judge the Wallachian planet for doing the same thing now?
I mean, it sounds like they're doing a little more than just experimenting on them, like saying that like they've got full-on control over them, seems like, just because they think they're superior, but with this plague in place, yeah, clearly you're not. It kind of seems like the planet's taking a different direction here.
Oh, I get what Norman, it took me a second. Norman's talking about the cardigans that they wear, like these really long, that's the Vlaki. They wear these long cardigans. It took me a second. I'm just like, who are they?
These guys.
Yeah.
They like being comfortable.
Following up on that, can you think of our world's examples that are similar to the Vlaki and Menk?
some people on this planet are supposedly living in shithole countries. I'd like to start there,
Fair point.
please.
That is a fair point. Yeah, we don't have like another humanoid species to look down on. We do plenty of that amongst ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who
And
needs
then, although I am not one, so I'm not going to make their argument for them, we could talk to the vegans about how animals are treated on our planet. I believe that I'm not a vegan, don't believe in, well, I believe it exists, but I do not believe it is the right choice for me. But, I mean, that's a valid viewpoint to hold.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to swing for the most obvious one, but, you know, there's this thing about people who look differently than Europeans. I think, for instance, if a country, even a small country in Europe, were being menaced by a foreign country to remove their democracy, I think there'd be less controversy in America about helping that out.
fair points.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah, remember the dolphins thing, because I didn't eat tuna for like a decade. Because when I found out that, like, yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting point too. You know, what constitutes a higher life form? And to every group, especially aliens, it is a little different. I think we need to do this episode that I'm about to bring up as its own thing, Cogenitor, which is like another big enterprise.
Right.
Like, whoa, what did we just step in here? A lot like this. But in that one, I actually take a view that a lot of people don't, that Archer, like, agreeing to not get involved is probably the right decision in that, just because you can't step into the reproductive process of an entire species that depends on 2% of its population. That is way above your pay grade. And this one, it's a little more of a gray area. I could definitely see it going either way. I don't know that it's like the offense that some people think it is to not help them, but I also don't fully understand it. So, like, a couple of follow-up questions we have here. Would the Prime Directive had applied to this world if there was one at this time, since there had already been first contact from other alien races? Or would, like, future Federation have just helped this planet?
Makes me think of something I saw way back in the day where somebody said, like, the Federation can't blow its collective nose without analyzing the implications until they decide non-interference is the only solution. Damn.
I think there was a middle of the road answer. I do not believe that the answer was fix everything, fuck off. Excuse my language. I think the middle of the road would have been to treat the specific Volakian symptoms that were causing them suffering in the moment, and then saying, we're sorry, but we can't help you on the larger issue because we don't get involved. That way, they're not just being completely heartless and going, yes, we have all this advanced technology, but we're not going to use it on you. It's more like, we can make you comfortable now, but the long term of the disease, especially since personally I don't consider genetic disorders diseases that need to be cured, that, like, we're helping your suffering. We're doing the things that doctors are supposed to do. We're just drawing a line because now there's the potentiality of, you know, literally poisoning other species, as well as just poisoning their thought pattern. Because we can go back to how in the world does an alien doctor who's on the alien doctor exchange, he's not even a Starfleet officer, know how to treat these people if he's never met them before? For all we know, they're giant octopuses inside those skins. You know what I mean? Like, even if he uses his fancy fMRI level stuff, he may still not know that, like, bat venom is going to be poisonous to them.
Well, right, you're not going to know everything, but somebody
Yeah.
like Phlox that has had decades of training, he's got 6 or 8 PhDs
Yeah.
in all kinds of different
Damn.
stuff, and has seen a ton of alien races. Yeah, he's not going to get everything right every time, but I think he can infer enough
But if you're going
from
to tell a
similar life
race of
forms.
people that you can cure a genetic dysfunction,
Did they say
that's
that?
not something that you're going to do on the, well, based on my experience on similar series. Like, if you're going to cure somebody of something, you got to be able to look them in the eyes and live up to that promise. I also did want to bring up the fact that they met the Ferengi first.
Yeah, the
So,
Ferengi would have sold them anything they
Oh,
wanted.
exactly. So what doing?
That's actually kind of a good point. If they'd already met the Ferengi, how do they not have warp technology?
Right. I mean, if
Price is
Quark
probably
is willing to offer it to 1940s Earth, then like all bets are off with the Ferengi. Maybe the Vlockies couldn't afford their price, but
I bet
like
anything is
if
that.
I were a Ferengi doctor, and we know that they exist somewhere, like I would have started with, we can heal you completely of this thing for 100 gold plus platinum. Oh, you can't afford that? Okay, we can give you a painkiller that's better than anything you have for 40 gold plus platinum. Oh, you can't afford that either?
I
Okay.
wonder what that is.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? I'm just saying, like,
Right.
you'd think they would have left them with something. Even if all they got was, like, Manhattan type trinkets. Just to establish the relationship. Because if you can't sell things to them, then you can use your financial power over them. Not that I also think like a Ferengi from time to time.
So yeah, I feel like the Federation in a future instance that had the Prime Directive probably would have helped here. And like we have the question, how would other captains have handled this Prime Directive conundrum? And I think almost all of them, except for maybe Picard, and it would depend on at what point he was in his career, that wouldn't help them. I feel like
No,
every captain would have, even if it was breaking or not breaking, I think every single captain except maybe Picard would have helped them.
I don't know. I might put Cisco if it were close to the Bajorans in some way. I think he would have gotten involved if it were like within the purview of the station, not just aliens coming on the station. Like if there was another planet next to the Bajora named, I don't know, something else, and they had this issue with like the 2-layer system where one was sick and one was not, I could see Cisco at least doing the middle road and giving them a way to feel more comfortable, if not to cure them. But I think Janeway would have been out of that system before Phlox finished his sentence. She would have just been like, this is not about us getting home or exploring scientific things. We're out.
Yeah, she was now to accelerate evolution. Honestly thought Picard would probably relocate the Mink of all people.
That's true. I
Just
didn't
find a
think
planet where they can where they can thrive and evolve in their own way, and hopefully that doesn't depend too much on environmental factors because they'll be in a new environment. But I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
No, that's a good point. I think that's totally possible if they had asked to like as a group to be for Federation asylum and for help,
or
I
even
think they
just
would help.
open the conversation with the Mink about it. Because there are ways that you can crunch down that vocabulary to get to where they imply the Mink like intelligence. Although later they go on and say, oh, no, they're super smart. Their language skills are not really up to snuff. But yeah, I think I mean, I understand why Archer didn't, but I could see someone else like explaining what asylum was and explaining the different ways asylum can take place and then letting them make their own decision.
Yeah, I think Janeway would have given us a speech about why we shouldn't and then done it. I think Piker and Kirk would have just done it. And if it pissed off the Prime Directive and broke it, they would have done it twice as fast.
Right.
Justin, do you know that you combined Riker and Picard in that statement? I can't. You didn't say. I think you said Piker.
Said Pike and Kirk.
Oh, okay. I
Pike
heard
and Kirk.
Piker and Kirk.
Oh,
So that's why
okay.
I got like
All right.
confused.
He's a Piker.
Because I think Riker and Picard would make different decisions.
Yeah, but it would still be well within the Prime Directive. One of the last episodes I was watching last night was Symbiosis. And that's when Picard, he will follow the Prime Directive to the letter, no matter how much it sucks.
Hi, Laura. Thanks for stopping by.
So we've kind of already touched on this one. Are the Manx slaves, or is this just a case of cultural differences? I think they're slaves. I don't think there's any other way to see it, personally.
A little bit.
And I know they're all like, oh, but this you can't judge this culture. That's not ours. No, they're fucking slaves.
They're not trying to fully assimilate them, like the Vlakians speak the Manx language, which is great and all, but yeah, there's some slavery elements here.
I think what is not explored enough to make that call is really how the Manx feel about it. Because the one time they really discuss it, like the Manx don't even understand how their society could be structured differently.
Right.
This is just the way things are on their planet. And regardless of whether or not we think of them as being more intelligent than the Vlaki, which is a question really in the end, like maybe they're choosing. I could see a human being go. I could either be a politician or like a high-level executive, or I could have all of my expenses taken care of and just make sure those asses are fed. Like I could see people on this planet making that choice, whether it's because like it frees them up to do more artistic pursuits or whatever it could be. There are some people who would be like, yeah, I'd take a pay cut if I didn't have any stress and all I had to do was feed people all the time.
I feel like that goes
Yeah.
back to Guinan's speech and Measure of a Man, though, like where she just reverse psychologies Picard into realizing, no, that's still slavery. Just because you call it something else, it's still slavery.
It's just slavery.
That makes sense.
Steps.
Were you waiting to
but
say
saying
something, Scott?
Saying they choose it though, every time somebody says, when people say that, like they're choosing it, I always go to this one page in, I believe it's Goblet of Fire, where Ron Weasley's talking about the house elves at Hogwarts, and he's like, Hermione, open your ears. They like it. They like being enslaved. And I'm really glad, he had a character arc and changed his mind on that, but still.
I think also we have to be a little bit one-sided in the way that they present the Manx, because otherwise this episode would be 85 hours long and a documentary on the power dynamic and interworkings of the political and agregarial systems of a planet that we only visit once. Like, I believe that the script was written with the idea of making that jump comparison to slavery, but I just think there are other ways. I'm so afraid of coming off as a racist. I'm really not. I'm just like, people look at life and have different goals in life, and we can't judge them if they choose one that is an unequal power dynamic in which they surrender their power willingly.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I don't know. It's hard because when they're describing the societal difference, it's while the audience is still under the guise that the Manx aren't as intelligent. But once we find out they're at the same intelligent level, then it becomes, well, what is keeping them there?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why haven't they revolted 100 years ago?
Yeah.
Why didn't they revolt last week? And I know.
It still goes back to, you can call it whatever you want, but it's still slavery.
I know. I'm saying place of privilege. I'm calling it.
Right.
And I'm saying that I think it's meant to evoke slavery.
Right.
I just like to look at things from different points of view.
And
Oh,
that's
absolutely. I'm not
Yeah, totally.
faulting you for that.
Not. Please tell them I'm not a racist, Dustin. I'm not a racist.
I don't think I need to. I
Okay.
think you've made your own case. It's okay to talk about this stuff.
No, I just. I'm one of those.
Norman has
That's
a
a great
great point
question.
here. Like yeah, Discovery specifically. You know, after 1,000 years, because that was Phlox said it would be about 1,000 years that these people have. They got to get their genetic shit figured out, or they're not going to be a people. So that seems like the
I think he
perfect
actually
show
said a
for it.
couple of centuries. Wait,
Yeah, I think it's 2 centuries.
which would kind of bring it
I
into
thought he said
TNG
1,000 years, but either
territory.
way. Okay. Yeah, that would be lower that.
And then I was
so,
going to be like,
sure.
oh, if TNG had revisited this, no, they didn't. They came first.
But yeah, just still Discovery. I think it would be really
Yeah.
interesting to get that far in the future. And then I'm pulling for the Menk, so I want to find out that like the Valakians just died out, and that the Menk are like at an even higher level than the Valaki were when we last saw them. And great, or that they got to the point where the Menk could cure them, but there were so many more Menk than Valakian left that the tables turn. And it becomes like they become the slaves. Then we get to have another discussion about it.
The other. Oh, all right, fine. If I'm in for 100. The other thing I saw about this was like, no one, not Phlox, not Archer, not anybody on the planet, nobody suggests maybe if you guys got together and became friendly, that like maybe that resistance to this genetic mutation would slow down / stop / like at least equalize things. Like, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, we're
there may
dancing around the eugenics word, but I think this entire episode dances around the eugenics word.
Yeah, I mean, obviously.
But in this case, I'm talking specifically about intermingling in order to make everyone stronger, rather than just kind of wait and stay completely separate from each other.
Yeah, I think there may have been a line. I'm sure I'm probably wrong about this. I think the Valakian doctor said something about them being physiologically incompatible. Although, if they both somehow evolved on this planet, it would suggest they have a common ancestor, so that doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, they're not complete. Maybe for mating, but they're not completely physiologically incompatible, because Phlox develops the vaccine out of the Menk.
True.
So let's move on to the lighter part of the episode. We might come back for a few more questions at the end about the really hard-hitting part. But the other main plot going on here is this thing between Cutler and Phlox. Now, why does Cutler give incredibly mixed signals and then friend zone him when he reciprocates? Or am I completely misreading this?
I think she was flirting with him. She learned about like the difference between Denoblians and humans, and then just wanted to communicate 2 things. 1, I'm not looking to be your wife. And 2, if maybe if something develops between us, then we can have this conversation. But right now we're just effing flirting, like Mr. Phlox. Go back. Like, you can flirt without a goal. So I don't think she's leaving mixed signals. I think she was flirting with him, went on a date with him. He said, by the way, I have 3 wives and I don't really have room for more. Then she was like, wait, I wasn't even looking to be a wife. I just wanted to like go on dates with you and have fun. I think that was a big part of it. Like, I know that removes it completely from the Star Trek setting, but just looking at it as 2 people figuring out how they like each other. Like, if you want to go in that direction, I think it's there too.
Yeah, I think I based my opinion more on like the whole thing after the first date, where it seemed like she was really trying to get him to come back to her quarters. But yeah, I would definitely say her tune kind of changes. Like, oh, you have 3 wives right now? You can do that? Like, yeah, I'm not cut out to be a sister wife. We tried that on Earth. It didn't really pan out.
Like, as a poly person, I have that conversation on the reg. Like, someone will find me attractive, and I'm like, I'm not opposed to this, but you need to know what the situation you're walking into. and when things change. Like it's if I go out on a date with a person, it's not like I then have to sit down with them and explain the entirety, but like they should at least know. Like I would usually invite them in to meet the partner that I live with. And then if something starts to develop, that's when I'm going to say, all right, we need to have the sit down. You just need to know that there are other people in this equation and where their influence and feelings lie. And then you make your own decision as to whether that's something you want to join. So that I don't think that's why he didn't like say it from the very beginning, the first time she asked him out. But as soon as he started, after he discussed it with Hoshi about whether or not this was actually a romantic overture or not, that's when he goes and says, here's the dealio. Like, this is what life is like on Denoblia. And if you want to get involved in that, you need to know that. And that's when she was like, whoa. Like, I don't want to know about all your partners. I just want to know if maybe, like, we could hang out and maybe, like, fool around once in a while. That was the way I took it. But I know, being a polyamorous, I have a weird position on the Denoblians to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, it just seemed like a big turnaround to me. I mean, it went from, like, it seemed like she was ready to give him a handy through the bucket of popcorn during the movie to just, like, I'll call you.
There are also some people in this world who will go to great lengths not to have the relationship conversations. Like, if a handy happens in the popcorn bucket, that's great. We're just not going to talk about it unless, like, the salt was too much on your thing. But, like, because that sounds painful. But, like, I don't think she doesn't at all read to me as the kind of person who wants to have the serious relationship conversation before they go to the movies. So she would be totally down for it. Like, oh, you want handy in the popcorn bucket? That's great, but I'm not going to bring it up after the movie's over.
And also, it's not dark enough in this room for this.
That's true.
Like, it's like I was saying in the chat, that's going to get the group response he's looking for, but not the exact group response he's looking for. What are you doing? Why does it look like that?
I did find that whole thing in the movies really interesting, and even like making Trip cry from just a random movie, I found very, very interesting.
It is a very moving movie.
Yeah,
I've never seen
movie? I can't remember the title. Sure. I know I've seen it. I can't remember the title, but it is known as like a tearjerker.
Classic. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. But it is a real shirt. I recognize the actress and the costume and everything, so I know I've seen it, but, you know.
The other thing I find interesting in this whole relationship plot is that Phlox does have 3 wives. He's got extensive knowledge and experience with people and dating and stuff. But he seems really taken aback and, like, clueless. Granted, this is the first human that he's had to deal with, but
I was gonna say, you remember how the Phlox wife who does show up, like, approaches her feelings about Trip in a completely different manner? That's what Phlox is used to. Is for the woman to come up and bang him on the forehead and drag him home.
Right.
Whereas that's not Cutler in any stretch. She's the opposite of that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's another episode. Enterprise has got some really interesting romance plots that play out, that's for sure. And season 1 was just a minefield. I mean, I'm sad that it didn't pay off. It could have paid off a little bit longer, though Kelly Waymeyer, the actress, died a year after this.
Yeah.
I mean, in this episode, she's talking about, like, the pulmonary system and then dies of heart failure. And she wasn't even as old as any of us are now.
Younger than some of us. But yeah.
The other interesting piece of trivia I found on this one was that the astronaut that they first pick up, the Valachian, that's played by the son of Joan Linville, who played the Romulan commander in TOS's Enterprise incident.
Ah, yes.
So, second generation Trek alum.
Right.
This is also the first name drop of Metalis Prime.
Yes,
They don't say Prime, but they say on Metalis.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, I didn't think that came up till later in the series.
Me too. Like
Right.
it kind of did that little like, wait, rewind, play. Yeah, that's what he said.
I think that was before Terry had even like written anything for Enterprise.
Oh.
So, Dell's question in here about this part of the topic was, how does the diromantic situation,
Demi-romantic.
situation, sure, I am not doing words today.
Sorry.
How does that with Cutler further illustrate the differences between Denobulans and humans?
Besides the obvious.
Yeah, I think we got that out of the way.
But
Yeah.
I do think if we're talking about love and looking at relationship love on a spectrum, it could be very well that Phlox is looking for love and Cutler's looking for something else.
Or at least she was.
Right.
And now you don't know.
So we don't really see the very, very beginning of all of this. We kind of catch them somewhere between being asked out to the movies and meeting up in sickbay.
Uh-huh.
So it could have been Phlox that initiated, we assume, because of the presumed sexual aggressiveness of Cutler that she made the first move, but it might have been Phlox. And I think Phlox may have done it as a friendly thing, not understanding that a human might interpret a person of one gender asking a person of a different gender to go to a thing alone together. Like, that could be another sort of just relationship assumption. That because everyone in Denoblia has 3 wives already, or, you know, usually it looks like the Denoblian males are more passive in the sort of fun catch chase of relationships, that maybe he's just doing what is normal for a Denoblian male to do, is kind of sit back and let the woman take the lead. But when the lead gets confused is when he goes to Hoshi and he's like, wait a minute, she's not telling me what she wants. Like, I don't know where to go from there. So that's why I started looking at it from like a romantic versus demi-romantic versus arrow sort of continuum.
That just gave me a really interesting side quest idea. I hate things with laugh tracks, but I want a 90s style sitcom about a Denobulan extended marriage. I want like all 9 fucking partners in one house, all living together. I bet that could be a fun half hour of television.
So noted. I'm still working on my damn Dax thing. Like, give me some time.
Right.
But I will. It'll go up because I mean the Dax thing. I have to write like 11 short stories that are comprehensive enough that you understand what I'm writing about. But I can probably bang out at least the opening scene of the sitcom. Let me see what I can do.
What would that be named? I want the people in the chat. What would you call a Star Trek show that's a Denobulan marriage rom-com sitcom?
The deflector shield is down. The idea that they can't turn anybody away, or that the deflector, is up, depending on the state of their relationship. I don't know. I'm too warm in my little room, so.
All right, I think we've exhausted the whole B plot there with Cutler.
Yeah.
So back to the more heavy-hitting stuff that we have left.
Right.
Is Archer's realization about the tables being turned from the Vulcans withholding information from humans actually the most pivotal part of the episode? I think it's the most Star Trek message that gets learned.
At least from Archer's perspective, wholeheartedly.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, not gonna lie, my first rewatch of this, I was totally on Trip's side. Like, why are humans being kept from exploring space? Why are the Vulcans there, like, holding their hands? First time I could really see myself sympathizing with a Florida man. But then, this episode comes along and Archer realizes, oh, right, handing over warp technology is not as easy as that. And probably hits him a little harder because his dad was working on warp engines, before he was even born. Where's he going with this? So yeah, it's an interesting juxtaposition. Kind of like the first instance of people of Earth realizing, oh yeah, we kind of have an important role to play going forward, don't we?
Yeah, going out in deep space, you have some responsibilities. And, at least the Vulcans, they had the structure there. They had enough ships and enough colonies and enough people where they can take the time to help others. This
Would that line more is if they were like,
humans'
maybe
first
someday they
deep
have some
space
sort of direct.
mission. And they are not equipped to, like, leave people and come back and keep helping these people the amount that they need.
I mean, we don't even really have new life or new civilizations, I think, at this point, really.
True.
in Enterprise. Like, they're still figuring out that part.
And Norman brought up this intro. Yeah, they kind of beat you over the head with it because it is obvious that they're talking about the Prime Directive if you've seen any amount of Trek before the episode.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, the only way they could have made that line worse is if it was like, someday there'll be some sort of directive, like the most important one or the prime one, that this, that, and the other thing. Like, that's something I would do in a comedy sketch.
Right?
Yeah, it worked in Strange New Worlds when they, like, want to change it. Oh, that'll never stick.
Right.
That worked as a joke, but this kind of didn't. It beat you over the head.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the idea that genetic disorders are treated like an illness to be cured rather than a natural occurrence in a species?
Yes, Del, how do you feel about that?
That's not a dull question from the get-go. I swear, it was all Dustin. Right?
Well, I'll answer it first.
Yeah,
I think
please.
it depends, because in this particular instance, I think it is treated correctly, because it's not just like a disability that you can work with. This is something that is going to end their civilization altogether. So in this instance, yes, I think it is something to be cured. In all instances, no.
I think the big message behind this is that not all genetic disorders can be cured at all, and B, and we'll talk about this more next week, I promise, is the idea that disability is not about injury or illness, it's about lack of access. And so this idea that slowly dying off due to evolutionary issues may or may not be considered a genetic disorder, but that it would have felt better for me as someone who has a genetic disorder that, like, maybe we could at least talk about the idea that, like, maybe this manifestation only exists in 85% of the population, and there's something different about Velakis who don't get it, maybe because they're, like, crossbred with Mank or something. But it just, for me, as someone who has a genetic disorder who, like, and especially when I was trying to get diagnosed, like 80% of my doctors were just like, oh, you have this thing, take this pill, you'll feel better. And then when I went back to them and said, well, I feel better, but I don't think everything's done. Like, I'm still in a wheelchair, still, having issues. And then at some point I just personally had to be like, there's no cure for this. There's a diagnosis. I got it. I know how that manifests. So at this point, like, when I go to a doctor, I talk specifically about symptoms and not about the disorder in general and how I think it's manifesting. So I make sure I get treated, because that's the other thing I don't really get, other than we feel sick. I don't really think we get a specific symptomology from the Velaki either. They're just like, we don't feel good. And we don't know why these other people don't feel good. And I mean, granted, that was me in the very beginning going to a doctor, being like, I have now surmised that my experience of having a body is different than other people's. And I don't know why. So yeah, we'll talk more when we focus on Melora in specific about access and disability and that sort of thing. But I wanted to bring up this idea about genetic disorders being cured, and why I kept bringing up the idea of giving the Velaki something to make them feel more comfortable would be like address the symptoms, the immediate symptoms that are causing what I would call a disability.
Right.
And then go and say, well, now that we know these people aren't going to explode right this second, let's go into research and see if we can cure the disease. I have no problem with that. But like, let's deal with the situation we're in and not the aspirational situation that could happen tomorrow or a decade or a century from now. That sort of was my little banner to wave about genetic disorders in this episode.
Yeah, the last thing we have is along the same lines. How does sharing medical or scientific technology with pre-warp species go with or against sharing things like potions or and where are you going with this, Del? Because I'm not
so
sure. Like
here's
potions
the
and animal
question.
bits.
Yeah,
What?
I'm talking about Phlox. So here, what I'm talking about is, again, definition of technology. And so if the Denoblians know for certain that bat venom treats acne, but using animal parts to cure things is no longer part of the paradigm of human medicine, how is that different than offering like the Menka tricorder, or, I mean, maybe not so far as giving them warp technology, but they could have given them more medical technology, again, to treat the issues in the moment and maybe even set them up for research in the future, rather than have to make this black-white decision, do we take off or do we cure it? Is like, maybe we can set them up so they can cure themselves in a decade or two, rather than it being our responsibility. And so this idea that like it's a yes, no, we give them technology, we don't give them technology, feels weird, since like the Denoblians are sharing their medical technology with us. It just looks, it's not made of machines. It's made of bat venom and dog poop and whatever else he's got lying around. I mean, in the same way that I think that happened when our species was more involved in sort of earth-based, animal-based, plant-based solutions to human problems versus popping a penicillin. Like, there had to be a transition between those two things where people had to sort of realize one was more predictable than the other. But if the Denoblians are in space before us, and they're so crowded that like any airborne pathogens would wipe out the entire planet, like maybe they know something about bat venom and dog poop that we don't. And like, why are they openly sharing it with us? Especially now that he sees us turn around and be like, no, tricorders for you. We're not going to leave you anything medical to help you with this thing. Like, they could have at least left them, I don't know, replicated 100, no, they don't have replicators. I don't know, made 150 med kits and left them behind. Anything. Make like any motion toward medical support rather than medical solution. So that's sort of where that question was supposed to go with the animal bits.
Okay.
I think, did I confuse you, Scott?
I'm almost always confused. But yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think you summed up what you're thinking. You broke my brain. I don't have an answer to that.
Yeah, you're just talking about the idea of sharing medical expertise.
Yeah, basically. The idea
Okay.
that like we didn't really give them anything. We let them witness Starfleet. They let them witness their medical procedures, but it wasn't like, here's the way you can continue this testing and this research. Here's this way that you can learn who has the disease and who doesn't. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Norman's got me. Like,
But-
yeah, this,
Hints. Oh wow.
yeah, like nothing.
Okay. That's true because we're just kind of like, yeah, here's some treatment. No, we can't do anything else. Bye.
Yeah, no, like, hey, this is how you can find other people with this disorder, or because I mean, with the way that their medical stuff looks like, how do they even know all the Velaki have it? Like, they don't have a test. So even giving them a test just to see who definitively has it and who doesn't might help their research. Like, it just seemed like a very black and white answer to a very nuanced episode.
Do we have any other last minute things we'd like to add into this? Because that's all we got.
Yeah, this episode, I think it almost brought into question like Phlox's attitude towards animals because like he's got his menagerie and he feeds them and takes care of them, but he also seemed very surprised at how affectionate Archer is with Porthos. He said like almost humanizing him and seeming kind of surprised that humans will do that with certain animals. Although it does like he's not, flying his Pyrithian bat around the ship or anything, but he's got plenty of animals that he's taking care of, so it seems like he should understand.
And I definitely think part of that is ownership. Is I think that humans have a sense of ownership over their companion animals, whereas Floxy's talking to them and feeding them and carrying them, like maintaining his medical supply. He doesn't really, give a care about whether they live or die, just how useful they are. And to keep them as useful as he can for as long as they can.
I'm only just putting this together. Is this hinting that Fox thinks that Archer sees the situation and this other race as pets?
Oh,
And just something to help? A lower life form that you bond with and you do the right thing because it is?
I can see that.
Yeah, now I'm starting to see your whole last question there, Del, a little bit more, and like the sharing of things and how you see and how the different races see these different types of treatments, and Phlox is looking at these animals that he's got in his menagerie as they're just an ointment. They are just a pill. They're not really here. Where Archer sees even his dog and all of these lower life forms as the same as higher life forms.
I mean, maybe, but he did want to do more for them. He was like all set on, giving them warp technology until T'Pol made him realize, oh wait, yeah, we can't play God out here.
But the thing is, we do play God with our pets. We choose what they eat.
Mm-hmm.
We choose where they go. We choose when they poop and when they don't poop and where they poop. Like, there is so much control we own over our pets that I could see.
Practice dog eugenics.
Right. Like, I could see where Phlox would be like, but wait a minute. Why is this like this and this completely different? Because it's very similar. And again, it goes back to my whole thing. This is like just the odd couple between different alien species, like over and over again. It's just like, I don't understand why you made that decision. I don't get why you made that decision.
Right.
All right, so let's give this our usual out of 10, and I am going to give it a 4. It takes a big swing at some big topics. It packs it full of a bunch of serviceable-ish filler. I don't think it necessarily hits on any of the points it tries to go for. The romance doesn't pay off. And less than pay off. It goes sideways. doesn't just die, it goes sideways. And I don't like that, where there's no closure to it. The gray, I guess I almost like that the main plot is a gray area, but there's just not enough there with all the other stuff in the episode for me to like it more.
I have to give it 2 scores. I tried to come up with an average, but it doesn't work. I give it an 8 for questions, and I give it like a 4 for answers. I'm going to award them points for asking some of these deep questions, or at least posing them in such a way to make people think. Because I don't think this sort of topic, whether it's Star Trek fans or humans in general, is a playground that people tend to live in unless it affects them personally. And so I applaud it for asking these answers and posing these situations, but I think the resolution is terrible and awful and should die in a fire. So
That's fair.
6, but that 6 doesn't sound like where I really want to land. So 8 and a 4.
Whoops. Put mine in wrong because, yeah, I'm going with a 5 on this. About as balanced as this plot is, because it takes a bunch of different plots and gives it enough so that none of them really feel like the main plot. It's nice enough that Archer realizes that being human means you can't play God. It's just something more people need to learn. The resolution at the end is really where it falls flat. Yeah, I'd say that's about all I got. Oh, right, Norman said 7. Sorry about that.
Yeah, nope, we're all good. Yeah, it averages right about in the middle, which is, that's about how I feel about it. It takes a swing. It's not as stupid as a lot of the episodes that can be below it in Star Trek. It has some substance. It just doesn't connect on all the points. So I think this is like one of the best averages we've ever come up with. And I just used a 6.5 for you, Del. So I can't put an 8 in. I guess I could put an 8 and a 4 and add an extra person. Wonder if that would change the number for fun.
I also like that this wasn't an episode that, like, the majority of fans either thinks is In the Pale Moonlight or thinks is Threshold. Like, I think it's good that we talk about some of these episodes that land in between, because those are the ones that get overlooked, especially the ones that swing for the fences even if they miss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd rather see an episode that, like, tries big and fails than episodes that, like, just try something fucking weird like Justice or, Naked Now, or the stuff Scott's dealing with in his recaps of season 1 of TNG right now on his channel. You guys should go check out his shorts that he puts out every day.
Good. Like, Scott, they're really good. Like, I'm not just telling people out there, I'm telling you that. They are really good. You get through it. It's funny. It's worth the freaking minute of your day to, like, watch them. I love them. So there you go. Get it all blushy on camera.
All right. And as Del had pointed out a little bit, next week we're going to talk about the DS9 episode Melora. Hoping we get. I should warn you guys beforehand
for the 3 of you who don't know. I use a wheelchair full time, so I have some thoughts.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. Another one like this that takes some big swings. I think it has a few more misses, but we'll get into that next week. I'd like to thank you guys for joining me here, Scott and Del. And all of you for watching. And until we see you again, live long.